Okay, here we go. I have to trust all of this tech.
But we'll learn. Probably things will go wrong, but then you'll know, for next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Use me as your guinea pig.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. I would not have gotten it all started and everything.
I mean, it's pretty cool that just before I leave that you've got it set up in time for us to have a chat, because it's all a bit tight now that I have a flight booked.
Yeah, I was just thinking it was last Saturday when we were like at the beach talking about it.
Was it really only last Saturday? You've managed to do all of this in 1 week. That's
because I was buying everything on 10/10.
Right.
Like, I remember that. Right. So now it's the 17th. It's been exactly 7 days.
Nice.
It is kind of crazy.
Yeah, amazing what you can get done in sober October.
Exactly. Okay. So, what do we talk about first?
Yeah, right. So many subjects. Well, I mean, we're in Thailand. We should probably make it clear to anyone listening, because people could be listening from anywhere these days.
Yeah, true. All the podcasts these days are coming out of the States, so this is going to be a change.
Yeah, I mean, all the main ones, I guess, but there's plenty coming from other places. I suppose they're just not on our radar. They're not being shown to us by our algorithms.
Yeah, like all the ones I listen to are out of the States.
Right.
I feel like.
Yeah, I listen to some UK ones, but also some US ones. I was just listening to actually Mr. Beast being interviewed by Paul Logan. Or maybe the other one. No, I think it was Paul. And saying that Mr. Beast is now getting all his channels put into other languages. Translated into. I think they're starting with Spanish because of Mexico.
Wow.
And he's just like hitting completely new audience, because obviously, a bunch of people who wouldn't have otherwise watched his show, watched his channels, are now getting it. I think that they are doing a bit of dubbing, but I think they're mainly doing subtitles. I don't know, actually. I can't remember what he said. But quite an interesting idea that when your channel's that big that you can just get it translated and then hit a bunch more people. Oh my God,
imagine if I could hear myself talking like Spanish and all these other languages. It would sound so foreign.
Yeah. Well, you already speak Thai, don't you?
Yeah, a bit. But it would be fun to do a podcast in Thai one day. I definitely want to do that. Okay, let's start with the easy topic. Let's start with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
How long
I could talk about jiu-jitsu for hours and hours.
Yeah, you were the one.
You'll have to cut me short.
No, I love talking about it. How long have you been doing it?
I started in the summer of 2012, but I only trained maybe for around 6 months, just going to one class a week. A private class, though, kind of semi-private, so the instructor plus me and another friend most of the time. There were some weeks that we didn't go at all, couple of weeks when I was there on my own, but mostly I had one of 3 or 4 people come with me, and 2 of those people carried on training at that same gym and have been training there ever since. But yeah, after about 6 months, I had to stop and have some hip operations. Well, one on one side, and then had to let that heal for 6 months before I could have the other operation on the other side, so that you can still get about, so that you still got one leg to and use crutches.
Was that related to jiu-jitsu?
No, it wasn't related to jiu-jitsu, but it was related to previous martial arts that I'd been doing. But really the problem was congenital. It's hip dysplasia. It's just shallow hip sockets, shallower than usual, because women have shallower hip sockets anyway than men. And that's why most of the people with the same issue that I have are women. 1 in 100 people have this issue, and 9 out of 10 of them are women.
Wow.
But it's also very common in dogs, certain dogs.
Okay.
And quite often it's spotted at birth, you know, and they can do certain things like, not sure exactly what they do, but there's a lot of like strapping up and stuff to try to, as the baby develops, to try to correct the problem. But also, like in my case, there was nothing unusual at birth, and then it sort of became a problem over the years. I didn't really notice it as being a big problem until I was doing martial arts, you know, kicking, and well, that was it really. It was whenever, it was a lot, you know, and it wasn't the kicking leg, it was the standing leg. You know, it's the kind of stability on the kind of, and yeah, it just kind of got worse and worse and worse. And I saw all kinds of people about it, you know, sports therapists and podiatrists, because somebody suggested it might be because I had small feet for my height and things like that. And of course, everyone you see thinks they've solved the problem, you know, in their field. And they're like, oh yeah, it's because of this, because of that. So for years it went badly diagnosed and like just had these kind of Band-Aid type things put on it, whether it was some physio or, you know, those arches they put in your shoes to kind of give you more stability if you have like a high arch. And I mean, those things kind of maybe helped a little bit, which kind of then threw me off a bit more, because then I was like, oh, well, they do seem to help a bit, so then that must be the problem. But then none of those things seemed to work after a while, and I was just using painkillers like every night to sleep. It was just kind of getting crazy. And so I just really pushed for a better diagnosis with doctors, and obviously incredibly lucky to live in a country with a National Health Service and be able to get all of this care and consultation and x-rays and MRIs and like injecting dye into my hip to see where the dye went and stuff. Arthroscopy, I think that's called. Until finally I was in a doctor's office with yet another doctor telling me that he just didn't really understand why I was in pain and what the problem was. And I could hear him go out of the room, and I heard him talking to another doctor, and it turns out this other doctor was just dropping some stuff off for somebody, but he was obviously a senior doctor, and this junior doctor was asking his advice, and I could hear all of this from the room next door, and I could hear the senior doctor looking at my x-ray and sort of saying that he wasn't sure, but his friend is a hip specialist, the best in Europe, and maybe he could help refer me to this guy. And you know, he thought he knew something about hip dysplasia, and he did suggest that perhaps it was, but he wasn't really qualified to say. And anyway, so I did get referred to this surgeon, and then this surgeon took a look at my x-rays and took a kind of measurement between two bones, which is like a way to decide, to determine whether or not you're, you know, the way your hips are configured are kind of normal, within a normal range or not. And yeah, mine were both quite far outside this range, the normal range. So he said because I was young enough and didn't yet have any signs of arthritis, which is what you would get, you know, usually. I think just for forever, women have just been putting up with the pain, you know. And I often see women limping around, older women, especially in Asia, right? And they just look and I'm like, oh, I know how that feels, but they're not going to get it fixed. They're not going to have an operation to kind of, you know, correct it. And total hip replacement is the most performed osteotomy operation in the world. And, you know, that is mostly women of a certain age, but they've got to the point where they need total hip replacement. Obviously, lots of men have it too now, especially if they've been in sport and athletics and stuff. But that's come, that point where you've had total hip replacement has come after, like, probably way more than a decade of pain. You know, it's crazy. But because I just really, really pushed these doctors for answers earlier, before I kind of was at that stage, I wasn't showing signs of arthritis, which meant that I was a good candidate for this new operation that this particular surgeon had been working on. And they basically break up your pelvis in many parts and then kind of re-pin it and position it to kind of give the head of your femur a bit of a deeper socket. So it sounds crazy.
Sounds painful.
I know, it sounds, well, yeah, I mean, well, obviously you're out. Like, you're out for hours. But yeah, like I had just done my PT course, like before the first operation. So when I saw my surgeon after the first operation and he came to see me in the ward, I remember saying like, oh, could you tell me a little bit about what you've done in there? Because I felt all kind of like, oh, I'm not a complete idiot. I've just done a bunch of anatomy training, for PC. And he was just like, he just looked at me and he was like, I did all kinds of things in there. And he like clearly just didn't want to go into it. So I was like, oh God, okay. But I still have 3 major bits of metal, like kind of, they could be taken out because they kind of served their purpose now. They put them in to kind of let your bone fuse in that position. But it's weird because obviously I don't feel it. If there's no problem with them, they just leave them in because it's better than opening you up to take them out again. But when I look at my x-ray with them in, I'm like, what? How am I not feeling those? Like, it's like you really just see these 3 quite long pins, on each side. But obviously they're long, thin, and go straight into bone, and you just don't feel it. It's quite amazing. Anyway, so this operation that I had did help. Like, that was almost 10 years ago now, and I'm only just now starting to kind of feel some of the same issues that I had back before then. So he did say it would postpone, your issue for around 10 years. So I'm really glad I did it. It totally allowed me to spend the last 9 years training jiu-jitsu. But anyway, so yeah, that's why it's hard to say. I started in July 2012. I did actually have a few classes in between the 2 operations, but then had to go get the second operation. And then after that second operation, instead of recuperating in the UK where I was for the first one, I wanted to take advantage of my dad still being out here in Asia. He was living in Langkawi in Malaysia, and so I knew he wouldn't be here forever and that he was thinking about repatriating back to the UK. And because I couldn't work, I'd already closed my last business down, and I was just literally kind of needed to rehab myself. And having done the first one, I knew what I needed to do. I didn't need to go and see a physiotherapist like I did the first time around. So I came out to Asia to spend time with him and to just get, I was on crutches still, but just to get back to normal. And with the view of going back to London for jiu-jitsu. I mean, I didn't even know what I was going back to England to do as far as job was concerned, although I had trained as a PT, so I thought that might be, something I could do. But really it was just jiu-jitsu. I was so obsessed, I had already come from other martial arts, striking martial arts, and I did have the same thing that most people have with grappling, where you're like, what is going on there? What are they doing? It's so weird.
It looks weird.
You just can't work it out before you know.
Yeah.
But after just one class, I already was like, oh, I get it, okay. And I'm not a complete idiot at it because I already had some body proprioception, I suppose. And I was also very comfortable being in that close, I think a lot of people struggle with that at first, Yeah. You are super close to your partner. But the martial art that I was doing for years before that was Wing Chun, and, there was quite a lot of close.
Wing Chun.
Yeah.
What other martial arts did you do?
I had done some boxing and a little bit of just played around a little bit with kickboxing and Muay Thai and some JKD and fun stuff, bits and pieces with friends. But the main one, I started with Taekwondo, but I didn't do that for very long. I mean, the main one, I suppose I did do a quite intense 6 months of boxing, but that was all very much like bags and pads and very little actual sparring. And in fact, when it got to the sparring stage, I was like, yeah, I'm out. Because I never was really that keen on the whole getting hit in the head thing. But Wing Chun was the one I mainly did, yeah. I had a bit of a gap. I kind of did it for 3 or 4 years. Even went to Hong Kong to train there with a friend of mine.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool. Under Ip Man's youngest son.
I've watched all those movies.
Yeah.
I love it. The Ip Man movies.
Yeah, we were really fortunate to be able to do that. And he actually ended up doing 4 trips. He'd done 1 before, and then we did 2 together, and then he did a 4th one after I finished. But I came back after the 2nd trip and had this idea for a kind of martial arts social club. So funny how these things work out. But in the time it took me to kind of do the business plan, work it out, find a venue for it, the kind of martial arts side of things had really gone away, you know. And I'd also found myself working at a pub where the manager was a guy who I got together with, and then he always wanted to run his own place too. He was out of like, you know, art school. He was a music producer, and he was managing this pub. So he kind of, you know, he was perfect. Like, we made a great team. He was like, right, let's do this together. And it also made it easier financially. He was able to get a loan, and that kind of like bumped up what we were able to kind of offer the bank. And then the bank doubled what we had, and that was what we needed to get started. So anyway, we got started, but then literally we kind of did, I think, a couple of months worth of renovations on this underground, used to be old public toilets, made for some Edwardian fair that was like in London.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. And there was still like, you could still see some of the mosaic tiling on certain areas, you know, it was like, but, and it was only a men's as well. It was huge. So yeah, I mean, it had a capacity of like 200 people. It was just toilets. Underground, like underneath the green in Shepherd's Bush. So anyway, we kind of renovated this place for a bit, and then it came close to like opening day, and I remember just saying to my partner, who had nothing to do with martial arts, you know, yeah, I don't think we can, I don't think that's going to make us any money. I think we need to really focus on like stuff that's going to actually bring people in. And luckily, you know, he had a lot of good friends in London, and we very quickly kind of got a good network of DJs and musicians, and did more live music stuff. And then about a year in, we started doing stand-up comedy nights as well, so that was really good. But yeah, the martial arts thing, we actually, after we ran that place for 11 years, and then in the last couple of years, we did start doing martial arts classes down there. I started training Wing Chun again, mainly because I had started training again after a break. And so, you know, it was the perfect place then. Not perfect, it was very dark and dingy, but it was, you know, there was a big space there, so we did it. But the original idea was, you know, the martial arts would be a big
Social
part of
club.
it. Yeah. Oh, so funny. I remember being so into martial arts that I couldn't understand why everyone else wasn't. And I kind of felt also, you know, now we hear a lot about being in your own bubble. But back then it was a less of a kind of known thing, and I had all my non-martial arts friends and martial arts friends like going out in the evenings to pubs and giving out questionnaires to like random strangers to see whether or not, you know. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the audio. It's good. It's good. I always hear Joe Rogan like, pull that sucker up to your face.
Right. Yeah. I love it that we're all taking these tips from the people that we watch, you know, and that they're willing to kind of, you know, give good advice.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, but anyway, just discovering, you know, when these questionnaires come back that, oh, they're not interested in a martial arts bar. Why wouldn't they be? Yeah, and just kind of realizing that, you know, it's quite easy when you're in a niche, in a little thing, and it becomes your life, and you're kind of, you know, you're spending all your social time with the people in that niche too.
Yeah.
You forget that it's still a really small thing.
Did you know a lot of other girls who were also doing martial arts, or it was just you? Just me and a bunch of guys. I was quite used to hanging out with a bunch of guys. I've got a brother quite similar in age, so we often had a lot of the same friends, and so I would hang out with his friends, and he would date my friends. Interesting.
But no, it was fine. So I didn't mind that I was the only girl at all. It didn't bother me. But no, I've had other girls join since. Like when I went back to train, like several years later, one of my very, very good friends was training. Actually, she was sort of training when I wasn't, and then when I went back, she'd already stopped, and then she sort of came back for a bit. But then there was another girl that was very good and that was training too. And actually, that was a really important lesson, because I was like, oh, you know, girls can be good at this too, not just me. I mean, I didn't think I was good, but like I kind of managed to just about hold my own, and it was nice to see that there were other girls also that were, you know, could pick it up and were just as good. So it was quite nice, yeah, having some other girls in the class at last.
Yeah, it's huge. It makes such a big difference because training with men is hard.
It is. It's really tough, yeah. I like to think in Thailand, though, that we've had the benefit of some sort of smaller framed men.
100%.
Which has been kind of good. Yeah, the guy who I did my blue belt test with, Tan. Do you remember Tan?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so he was always good because he was great because he was a guy, so he was going to, but he didn't exactly have the kind of musculature of your average kind of, well, certainly not a Westerner. And he was a great training partner. I enjoyed training with him. I don't know what's happened to him. He's fallen off the...
I think he might have moved.
Really? Well, he went to the UK for a bit, but he did actually train while he was in the UK at Exeter Uni. But then when he came back, we only seen him like a handful of times. I don't know. Anyway, hope he's okay. He was really into guns. So weird. Like, such a nice, sort of sweet guy to talk to. And then you'd see his Facebook page, and it was like just him at the shooting range all the time. Like.
Yeah. Maybe it's a short stop from there to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you were one of the people that helped me get started.
Really?
I remember when I first started. I mean, the guy I was dating at the time was like, he was the main influence because he bugged me to do it for years, and I resisted for a long time. But then I finally signed up, and I remember you saying to him like, "Don't worry, we'll take good care of her."
Cool.
I had actually tried to start a few times earlier, like about 2 years before I actually started. I had like my first class, and it was not a good experience.
So that was, where was he training? Because that wasn't at BFL. Where was that?
The first time I started, it was in the States.
Oh,
so I was in the States.
Right.
I went to a gym there that he was training at. And
so he was an MMA guy, though. So was this an MMA kind of gym?
Yeah, it was an MMA gym.
Is that why the experience wasn't good? Because it was just a bit too testosterone-y and heavy?
No, it wasn't good because I just felt super lost. Like it was a big class. There must have been like maybe 30 people. And there wasn't any kind of like instruction or guidance of like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how you might feel in the beginning. It was just like thrown in there, start rolling right away. And I was like,
yeah. Well, I think that, how you deal with people in their first ever class, but also in their first 10 classes, let's say, is absolutely crucial. There's a lot of talk about people dropping out of jiu-jitsu. Oh, not everyone's got what it takes. And people drop out. You got to ask why?
Yeah.
Because of course there will be people who try it and they just think, even if you gave them the best experience possible, that they would just feel it isn't for them and they would never do it again, sure. But I really feel like that's actually a small percentage of people. And if you give people a really good experience and you continue to look after them and make sure that, until they really feel like they're a part of the gym and that they found their feet and they feel a bit more capable physically, I think the retention would skyrocket.
Yeah, 100%.
But so few gyms are prepared to put the time and effort in, to think about those things and really make them happen. And it is tricky. I got to say, now I've obviously been involved a little bit with scheduling and stuff and classes and how classes are run. It is tricky. It will take time and effort to kind of make that a thing,
Yeah.
And of course you want to try to give everybody the biggest possible number of classes that they can attend because everyone's got different lives and jobs and times when they're free and everything. But really, I think the best thing to do is to have 1 or 2 classes a week which are only for pure, literally, your first fight, Either it's your first trial class or maybe you could say, up to 5 classes. Then you can go into the beginners classes after that. But at least then you have everyone in one place and you're not trying to deal with people of lots of different levels and stages, and you're halfway through, somebody's joining for their first trial class, but you're in the middle of a thing, you spent all week working on this particular position and you want to carry on with it, but then you're literally throwing these people in to something really confusing. Anyway. Yeah. It's worth thinking about, I think, if you're
100%.
running a gym.
I've always made sure, I've tried to get all of my friends into it, and I always try to make sure they have a really good first experience, because I would have started so much earlier if I had a good experience. And it wasn't a bad experience. It just, it's intimidating to go into a gym and to try something new. And if you don't have someone that you feel like you can trust to like explain it to you, it makes the experience so much harder.
So it's amazing that you did then decide to try again, having had a bad experience. But why was that then?
Well, because my boyfriend kept bugging me.
Right, so you were still in that situation where you were like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, the first time I went just to try it out because he kept asking me to. And then I didn't really enjoy it, so I didn't really want to go back. And then when we were back in Thailand, he was like, then he was training at Bangkok Fight Lab, and he was like, come into this gym and try it out again. And I was like, okay. So I went in, and that's when Lee was coaching.
Yeah.
And I had another bad experience. That was probably worse than the first one.
Oh my God, I had no idea about this. What was this?
It was a small class, it was an advanced class, and the warm-up was the harder part of it. Like, the warm-up was everybody was just like on their knees, basically, and you had to leapfrog over each person, and I'm not good at jumping. So I was like, I can't do that, and if I mess up, I'm kicking someone. So I was like, I don't think I can do that. And he was like, well, you have to do something. So, do this other move instead. He was like not understanding or sympathetic about it at all. He was kind of just like had no patience for that. So I felt very singled out, because first I felt like I wasn't very confident. Like I didn't have any background in martial arts. I was not physically coordinated or anything. So I was already very self-conscious about like what I could and couldn't do. And then everybody else could do this warm-up, and I couldn't do it. And then I had to do, like, this weak little extra move. And, yeah, so it just started off on a bad foot. And then it just, it just wasn't a very good class. Like, I got the impression that he didn't really have any patience or time for beginners. He wasn't really interested in coaching women. He mostly just wanted to focus on, like, the few men that were doing well. And, again, he was an MMA coach mostly, so I didn't really feel like I could trust him as a coach, and so I didn't go back until he stopped coaching.
Interesting.
And then I went back when Morgan was coaching, and that was a much better time. Like, Morgan actually came out of the class that he was teaching to, like, talk to me, and he answered my questions, and he said, like, we have a beginner class on these days. I suggest you come on these days and, like, take a beginner class first. And then I felt like, okay, I can try this out, And I also made a decision to like commit to doing a month of it and then seeing how I felt, rather than just like going in for one class. And then
I like this about you. You set yourself good parameters and goals, and then you're quite disciplined with that kind of thing. I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's got you. So now you've been training for how long?
5 years, on and off a little bit because of quarantine and all of that. But yeah, I've been on it for 5 years. It's been awesome. Like, I love it. I try to get all my friends into it. Once I got into it, then I loved it. It changed my life. But it was hard getting into it at first. And I kind of wish that, I had gotten into it earlier, or I had a different experience. But I think timing, like, I probably just wasn't ready for it earlier.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's considering you've been doing it for 5 years now and are highly likely to continue doing it, then it's easy to look back and think, that was all worked out in the end.
Yeah.
But for so many people, I think, they won't ever go back because they just have those first few bad experiences, and it seems like a shame.
Yeah, or even if they do have good experiences, it's still hard for them to come back. Like, I've made sure a lot of my friends have good experiences. I take them in myself. I partner with them myself. But even then, they don't come back. Yeah.
But then those people probably are the people that, you're badgering them just like you were badgered to come. So then they think, okay, God, all right.
Yeah. Just going to do one class to make it stop.
Yeah, exactly. But then they just, they don't think it's for them. I think that's fair enough.
Well, that's why I think it's good to talk about it, because I think when my friends see me talk about jiu-jitsu with other women, they realize that there's so much more to it, and they kind of get a sense. Like, recently my friend Frankie heard me talking with Amanda about it, and then she was, after that she was like, oh, I really want to try it out because I can see that you have a confidence together, like you guys are like lionesses, and I don't have that. And so I feel like maybe taking people in for the first class is not the right thing. Maybe it's like hearing other people talk about it, and then they understand what it's about, and then they can commit to it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's, aside from just being good for confidence and stuff, I think when you do hear two people who are passionate about jiu-jitsu talking, what you realize is, like what you just said, that there's so much more to it. It's not just about learning a martial art or method of self-defense or a sport, combat sport. It's kind of, well, we know it's ever evolving, it's ever growing. Every year that passes, with that many more people in the sport, that many more people being influential, YouTube has been amazing. Really, like, I think, I remember when I first started that it was sort of it was definitely frowned upon, but it was also kind of laughed at to be, like, looking at YouTube. Who knows what they're doing. And of course, that's also great, but it's just not always possible. And I think we've seen a huge uptake the quality of the stuff that is on YouTube now is so good that I think if you had a willing partner, you could probably get pretty far without a gym and without a black belt and just learning stuff online if you were disciplined about it. And it's never, I think the thing that you would really be missing, rather than like necessarily a kind of coach who can correct you and stuff, and that's all fine, but you can kind of trial and error a lot of stuff yourself. But what you really miss is just a range of training partners. So I have loved having, a main coach and being able to go to regular classes. But for me, like, the main thing about being in a bigger gym was just like lots of different training partners all the time. Because testing stuff out on different people and different body sizes, and also just having that kind of interaction, like even if
community and the people that you meet on the mat is like one of the best parts of it. And without that, it would be totally different. You can learn almost anything on YouTube these days, but you still have to like get on the mat and practice it.
Yeah.
I wish more women would get into jiu-jitsu, though. I am hoping to like one day do a girls only class. And I think if there was a girls only class, then it would be easier, because I think it's really rolling with men is what scares a lot of women.
Yeah, it's funny because I've over the years had it mentioned, about a women's only class and what was my opinion and stuff. And for a while I was kind of against it for a few reasons. Partly because I don't like the segregation. I don't like that generally in any walk of life. In an ideal world, we're all just people hanging out, doing whatever we love doing. But and it also you always do that thing of like, oh, but what if there was an only man's class? Only men's class? How do you say it? Only men's class. Men's only class. And of course, that's inappropriate. As you don't. I mean, I've realised now that it doesn't work that way. You can't just like flip it and go. But what about no? There's no need for a men's only class, whereas there is a need for a women's only class, and it's for the reasons that you say, that some people just feel too intimidated and they will just never start, and even if they start, they may never carry on, simply because they don't want to train with other men, initially at least. And I know that there are some gyms and schools now popping up around the world that are women's only, but I don't think that's good either, because I mean, it's fine if all those women really benefit in their own way and they're not, and they're great, like that's awesome. But I think that, certainly my goal, if I was going to be starting a women's only class, which I am going to be when I go back to the UK, is to try, to integrate those women into the mixed class as soon as possible, but to give them the best possible start with that, so that they can do it with confidence and that they can do it with enough knowledge that they can kind of protect themselves, and also empowered enough to say no to certain people or to stop a role if they're not comfortable. Because I think these are all things which, we all fall prey to in our early years. And maybe some people never really get out of it, but this whole ego thing of not wanting to, you're embarrassed to say no when somebody asks you to roll, or...
I agree that women need to be integrated into men's, like, mixed classes as soon as possible, but to give them that good starting experience. I think the reason why we don't have more women in jiu-jitsu is just the starting experience isn't comfortable for them. And often it involves injuries early on. Like at this gym where I train at now, we had a girl come in, try out, and she was enjoying it for like a couple weeks. She really liked it, and then she injured her wrist, and she just stopped coming back. Mm-hmm. And I feel like those kind of injuries could be avoided.
Totally. I mean, so we've just been having this discussion a lot recently because I've just introduced a new friend of mine, but a man, but still a man who is, tall, athletic, the kind of guy that, we would be worried to roll with if he didn't know what he was doing. Only he's the one that's worried because he's got so many pretty bad injuries from previous sports. He's broken his back twice, like once snowboarding and once like free solo climbing. And he's got like his shoulder, his knees, like his one ankle. I mean, he's pretty broken, but he really, really wanted to try jiu-jitsu and give it a good go. And, friends had maybe rightfully said in the past, you shouldn't, you're just going to get hurt again. But I managed to convince him that if he was careful just for the first 6 months and was with the right people in the right gym and was like doing the right things and not giving in to his ego, of wanting to roll and be competitive, that it was possible to learn jiu-jitsu without getting injured. I don't really know whether I'm right in saying that or not, because I actually literally don't know anybody who does jiu-jitsu who isn't injured in some way. However, that's because we've all still been training. A lot of us training now still train in pretty traditional gyms, with a fairly traditional warm-up and, not a huge amount of care and attention taken in injury prevention. But I do believe it's possible. It is difficult because you are doing a combat sport and it's not just you. You're not the only one that's like you're not only controlling. It's not only you controlling your body. Somebody else has an impact on that as well. And that's why I definitely think it's important early on to make sure that students, and you can't just tell individuals, like the whole class, the whole gym culture has to be on the same page with not being offended if you ask somebody to roll and they say no, and making sure that you do say no when you don't want to. And you don't have to give a reason, Often we're sort of like, oh, no, because this, that, and the other. And those reasons may be true, they may not be, but you feel the need to say why. But I think it would be great if you could be in a gym where everyone knows that you can say no without reason and that the other person does not have to ask or wonder and shouldn't feel offended, or rejected. Just move on to the next person. Do you want to roll? No? Okay, whatever. It's just this weird thing where it's like, and some gyms have rules. I've never trained in a gym like this, but I've heard that there are gyms that, you're not allowed to say no. If a higher belt asks you to roll, you're not allowed to say no. I mean... What are we, children? Like, we're all adults. We've all got different reasons for being there and, like, different things wrong with our bodies and stuff. And, like, that should not be a rule.
Yeah, you make a good point about, like, the culture. Like, if it was embedded in the culture, or the gym owner took it upon himself to enforce a culture where people are allowed to not roll if they don't want, or if people do roll aggressively and they injure someone, there's some kind of consequence for that. Maybe it's just a conversation that happens afterwards, and then they have to be a little bit more careful. But in so many gyms, there's no accountability for injuring a partner. You injure someone, and often the person doesn't say anything. Like, they'll just go home, they'll take a few days off training, they'll come back and they'll just try to tough it up.
My first major injury from jiu-jitsu was your ex-boyfriend. And he still to this day doesn't know it was him. He doesn't know because I never said anything to him. And for the first year, I never even mentioned his name when I talked to people about it. Maybe even for a few years. And it wasn't until he wasn't even around anymore and I wasn't seeing him anywhere and wasn't training with him and the people I spoke to probably didn't even know who he was. It wasn't until then that I was happy to sort of go, oh yeah, I did that to my shoulder. That was this, But, it wasn't his fault. I mean, he was going for an Americana over and over again. But if he had really wanted to finish that Americana, he could and have had me tap. But he was trying not to hurt me, so he was putting it on. And I just didn't have the experience to just say, oh, okay, good, yeah, nice tap, before it hurts. Yeah, I know that you could do that. Instead, in my mind, I thought, him being a higher belt, oh, he's giving me a chance to escape. So I was trying to escape, and then I would escape, and he would allow that escape, and then we would get back into the same position again, and he would do it again, and I would escape. And so it wasn't actually one big movement. It was a repetitive strain on one ligament. But it was actually within the period of me setting up for the restaurant in Yangon, and we hadn't opened yet, but I was busy. But I had just come over to Bangkok for a seminar. And I went back to the changing rooms after this. This was a role I had with him after the seminar had finished. And I went back to the changing rooms and I was like, I can't lift my arm. And I literally just couldn't even lift my elbow away from my side. It had nothing that would pull my arm up. And so it was difficult to get unchanged. And even in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, it's temporary. It'll come back. It'll be fine. But yeah, several months I had to get an MRI. I had to try to open this restaurant, not being able to reach up to the shelves. It was my cutting hand, right? My right arm, I was cutting vegetables, and it added a little extra into it. But funnily enough, though, it meant I didn't train jiu-jitsu for a few weeks, and those few weeks I probably shouldn't have been. I should have been really focused on the restaurant, and so it did sort of allow me to shift my focus to that and not be distracted. I mean, jiu-jitsu can be a massive distraction to other things. It's a time suck, obviously, but also you could look at it, which is how I look at it usually, that to me it helps. If I go to jiu-jitsu, I know that that's a stress reliever. It's a sort of form of meditation because you're going to be focused on nothing but jiu-jitsu for those few hours, and that kind of allows you to reset for the other things that are going on in your life. But at that point, it was probably quite good that I didn't go to jiu-jitsu for a few weeks. And then when I did go back, I went back all strapped up, only training on one side, no rolling, And for months, I held a tennis ball in my hand when I was rolling to sort of...
I remember that.
Yeah, in the end, I couldn't get rid of it. Even though my arm was better, I was like, I don't want to let go of this tennis ball. It became like a kind of comfort blanket.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also try not to blame anyone for any injuries. You choose when you choose jiu-jitsu, you understand that there's going to be injuries involved. It's always going to be your fault whether somebody else injures you or not, because we always choose to get on the mat. But like you said, most people just don't talk about it at the time. They don't say anything to the person, so the person doesn't know what they do wrong, and they could continue to injure that person, like other people, again and again. And yeah, I've had... Thankfully, nothing super serious. This knee injury was the most serious thing I've had, but I've almost never said anything. I don't think I've ever said anything.
Yeah, and you know what the interesting thing is about that is that it helps both parties to talk about it because, I remember a kind of very keen and strong white belt guy. I think I was a blue belt at the time, and I was in Turtle, and he just put all his weight on my neck suddenly, just because he didn't have whatever.
Stuff.
Yeah, and I heard my neck go crack, 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 and you're like, oh too, God, here we go. Now I'm not going to be able to move my head for a week, whatever. Actually ended up not being as bad as it sounded, and it pretty much had gone away within a few days. But he felt terrible because I had to stop at that point. I was like, whoa, okay, look, just, this is what happened, this is what you did, and this is now, that was quite scary. And he really took it on board, and he was so apologetic, and he sent me a message afterwards to see if I was all right and everything. And then a few weeks later, I rolled with him again, and he was better, significantly better. I mean, obviously, we're all getting better all the time, and I knew it was because actually he had learned a huge amount about, easing up, and being more aware of where you're putting your weight, and, just like taking things a bit more carefully and stuff. And that makes you better at jiu-jitsu, I think I've got better at jiu-jitsu when I've accidentally, injured people here and there. I mean, I've never done a bad injury on anyone, like any kind of muscle, ligament or anything, but I've accidentally kind of like, when a limb gets released from pressure and you end up like sort of smacking someone in the face or accidentally kneeing them or something, or like, there's all kinds of like minor things that can happen. But even those things, like, I think, because no one wants to do that, right? No one wants to be that kind of clumsy. Everybody wants to be a ninja, so that if you sort of are aware of those things happening, it kind of does make you rein it in and be have a bit more body proprioception and just tidy things up. And that's, also part of getting better. So, we should talk about these injuries.
You're right. We should talk about it. I don't know what it is. I guess it's the culture of like being tough and not letting people see the injury, like you almost don't want to admit that it actually hurt you.
Yeah, and also it's a weird thing of like, that's true, but then you have to ask, well, why? Why is it that you don't? And it's because it's almost like you feel you won't be believed. Like there's this thing of like, if you say something hurt, it's like, well, you could say that because you're trying to get out of a roll or something. But I just sort of feel like, well, even if that was the case, even if someone was making up an injury because they didn't want to roll because they were worried about hurting their ego, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, okay, I mean, that's something else you've got to work on then, but jiu-jitsu isn't just, getting better at jiu-jitsu isn't just about literally physically getting better at doing jiu-jitsu. It's also about growing as a person and learning things about yourself and recognizing maybe some of the things about you that you perhaps don't want to highlight so much and maybe want to kind of combat a little, and then other things that maybe you're like proud of and want to kind of do more, or whatever it is. It's a two-way thing, right? It's not just physical. So yeah, I think
I agree. A huge part of it is mental, like just having the confidence to say something instead of just keeping it. Because like for me, my injuries, when I didn't say anything, it was almost always because the person I was rolling with was a blue belt and they were a higher level than me. Like I was starting off as a white belt and I would get injured by a blue belt, and then I would think like, well, they know more than me, so they're not doing it wrong. It must just be I'm weak. I have weak bones or whatever, and I just get injured easier. And I didn't have the confidence to say to someone who was a higher level than me, something that maybe they would see as criticism, and maybe they don't want to take criticism from someone who's obviously a lower belt than them. So that's what kept me quiet for a long time. And now that I'm a blue belt, I don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah.
So like whenever someone injures me, I have no problem saying it, because like I guess I've learned enough now to have a little bit more confidence about it.
That's really interesting. I never really thought of it like that. Yeah, I think I can totally see why you would have felt that way as a white belt. But I suppose in a way, I'm just thinking about a story where I got quite severely kneed in the head by a black belt. And I think I was a purple belt at the time, or blue or purple, and it was quite unnecessary and a little like, he was a big guy and it wasn't like I was going hard, and therefore, it was something that kind of like happened as a natural escalation or him trying to defend something. It wasn't like that at all. But it was accidental, and I think you just telling me that story has kind of made me see that maybe in a different light, because maybe one reason why you don't feel so bad saying stuff now to people as a blue belt is more because you've realized that at any level, like you can still these accidents can still happen, so it's not like just because you get better at jiu-jitsu, you sort of, you will do less of them for sure. But I mean, only the other day, like I sort of foot slapped someone around the face, and I didn't even really realize it at the time. And it wasn't until the other people who heard it, apparently it was quite audible, and they like looked around and saw that they pointed it out, and I was like, oh yeah, I sort of heard that too, but I didn't really realize like what had happened or what it was. But the guy who it happened to said, oh no, it was fine. And sometimes you can tell with a slap that it's, you know, more sound than impact, but yeah, these things do happen. Like, yeah,
accidents are gonna happen.
And like your knee thing, I mean, that wasn't even anything big, right? But these things, like, especially, you know, as we get older, our joints and stuff, and we're doing jiu-jitsu, so we're putting these things under stress a lot all the time. So sometimes, like, an injury can come from something really small, you know, and actually what's happened is there's just been a build-up of like other things that have just been putting strain on it, and then it's just, you know, it's today's not your day type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I always say, like, it's nobody's fault. If you choose to get on the mat, you take the consequences for whatever happens. But what comes after that, like, that's also another thing, because, you know, you have to rehab yourself, and then you have to see that person again on the mat, and then you have to make another decision, like, am I going to roll with this person again or not? And that's kind of like where I'm at right now. I've spent a month pretty much rehabbing my knee and staying off the mat, and now I'm back on the mat, and I'm having to decide, like, am I going to roll with this person again? And a part of me doesn't want to not roll with him, because I don't want him to feel bad, and I don't want to cause any tension or anything in the gym. But at the same time, I just spent a month off doing something, you know, I wasn't able to do something I love. I would hate to get injured again. I know I would be angry at myself if I got injured again rolling with the same guy. So
yeah, true, but like we just discussed, like, he has probably learned a lot. You know, he will probably roll with you differently, knowing that even if it wasn't something he did that was particularly wrong or anything like that, that he will be more aware of the fact that it was him that it happened with. He won't want it to be him again, you know, and so he probably will roll with you more carefully. And so I would say, actually, it's probably likely to be fine. And you know what, Claire, the problem is that you train in a gym with very few people, and you don't really have the luxury of like choosing your partners.
Yeah, they're all men.
It's not like he's some 6'4", like built like a brick shithouse guy who you kind of should be avoiding. I mean, he's probably your best training partner here, like as far as like size and shape's concerned. So I mean, I don't know. I see what you're saying, but I would say, like, I train with him all the time, and I think he's actually a great training partner, and he will be careful.
Yeah, I hope he will be. It's just a risk, you know, like, I want to give him that opportunity, and I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and believe that he will be better this time. But at the same time, am I willing to risk my health for that? And I think, like you said, there's so few people at the gym that I kind of have to roll with him. There's really no choice, but it's in the back of my head to say no.
The other thing I would say though about injuries is that I think that you know, we've already agreed that you have to accept that certain things are going to happen, and we want to try to keep all injuries minor, right? Like, you know, a week off the mats at the most, you know, even a month was probably excessive. And, you know, get yourself back to good shape and try not to do anything with long-lasting consequences. So minor things are going to happen, and that, you know, yeah, let's try to keep the major injuries away. But for the minor ones, like, there is always something you can do, you know, like, I know you didn't, and I was impressed that you were disciplined enough, but then you were coming in to do fitness training. But, you know, we could have been doing drilling, certain amount of drilling. We could have still been doing some jiu-jitsu, but just not free rolling, and not, you know, possibly not drilling on both sides, you know, whatever it was that we would choose to drill. But, and I appreciate that you just chose to come in and just keep your fitness up, and that's fine too. But, yeah, I have had quite a few injuries at this point, and sometimes I have just said to myself, like, just don't train, it's fine, you know, nothing bad's going to happen. But I do start to feel, you know, my mental side kind of, I just know, I don't know or didn't know how much I was gaining from jiu-jitsu mentally until the thought of not doing it or trying not to do it because of an injury happened. Then I realized, oh no, I really need to get back on the mats and actually just do something. And even, I mean, that first injury, even just going back and watching for the first few classes, and then I was like, oh, this is super frustrating. And then, but I'd watch a class where I was like, oh, this class, like, I could probably do this class, you know, to some extent, because this doesn't involve that body part or whatever. And then when you think you're going to be deprived of this thing that you love, and then you manage to somehow work out a way to get back on, and even if it's in a very, you know, different way, do something, what you gain mentally from that is actually awesome. You know, you're like, there's a will, there's a way. You can, like, you know, and then when you actually do find yourself back on the mats fully recovered, you'll be very surprised at how little you feel like you've lost.
Yeah, that is true. I do feel like I've lost very little. And this is the first time I've actually taken a long time off for an injury. I've always just gone back after like a week maximum. The reason why I did this time was because sometimes I see with other people that have been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time, it's these like nagging injuries that never fully heal that end up being the worst ones versus like a big injury that happened once. Often it's like a little thing, and then they just kept training, and they were like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, and they come back before they're fully ready for it. And that's my biggest fear. Like, I was just afraid to come back too early and then to re-injure it and then to have it be like a lifetime thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, sensible, and I think that everyone's going to have to make these decisions themselves, right? But I think any very old person will probably tell you that every injury you have throughout your life will come back and bite you in the ass at some point. Like, I don't know whether we get away with full rehab on anything. I'm not sure. There's probably a certain amount of rehab you can do on things that actually make it even stronger than it was before. But that takes a huge amount of discipline. I mean, a lot of physiotherapists will say that some ailments and aches and things that you have at certain points in your life are due to other injuries, you know, associated injuries or things that you did in other parts of the body that kind of had compensatory problems. I don't know, I think it's just this ongoing thing that there's no real right answer, you know?
Yeah, everyone has to decide for themselves, like, what you're comfortable with, what you're willing to put your body through. And because I don't have, like, a background in martial arts or, like, anything physical, when I get injured even a little bit, I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, it was mostly just the peace of mind, because if I had come back earlier, and I tried a couple times to, like, do stuff with the knee before I felt 100% ready. And it was always in the back of my mind. I wasn't able to just move properly because in the back of my mind, I was like, no, it's not ready. It's not ready. It's not ready. So it was a mental thing that I needed to get over. Like, the knee was probably healed earlier, but, like, in the back of my mind, I had to, like, get over the injury.
Yeah. Oh, I understand. Yeah. It's part of the journey, to be honest, like dealing with injuries mentally as well as physically, like prehabbing and rehabbing is all part of it. It would all be part of any sport, right? But
it's the cost to doing jiu-jitsu, but the benefits are definitely worth it. Whenever I talk to my friends about doing jiu-jitsu, they're like, but what about the injuries? I see you get injured all the time. And I'm like, no, it's not all the time. It's just sometimes. I think that's also something that holds people back, you know, like they get injured once and then they're like, oh.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because there's so many things which would put off a lot of women. I mean, you know, I've seen girls come to jiu-jitsu, you know, beautifully manicured, like long nails or full makeup or their hair all done nice. And then, you know, I just know they won't come back, you know, because they just didn't realize that that's what they would have to, that they're going to end up looking a complete mess and all their makeup will be on somebody else's gi and that their nails will have like partly ripped off, but they've probably scratched a few people. I remember one class with a girl who had beautiful nails, and she was actually really good. Like, she was one of those people that just was picking it up super quick. And I was looking at her nails, and I was like, I want this girl to come back and start jiu-jitsu so badly, but I'm like, I don't think she's going to. And I said to her at one point, like, are you enjoying this? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, how much do you love your nails? Like, I don't think you're gonna be able to carry on doing jiu-jitsu with those nails. Like, you're gonna have to, like, you can have nicely manicured nails, lots of girls do, you do, but they're gonna have to be shorter. She had long nails, and she just said, like, yeah, no, my nails would come first. So I never saw her again. That was her choice. Fair enough.
Yeah. I know girls like that too, and they're like, well, what about the nails? And I'm like, it's a sacrifice. Unfortunately, you can't have those nails in jiu-jitsu. It's a big sacrifice if you've grown up like loving long nails. Yeah.
Even to this day, I'm really I kind of. It's one of my bugbears talking to women about jiu-jitsu and then ending up talking about makeup and periods and hair. But, however, having said that, the hair thing, like, when you see these top high-level, like, Brazilian black belts, and they've all got this beautiful flowing mane, I'm like, how? I don't understand. Like, how good do you have to be at jiu-jitsu to be able to still have, like, a big, long ponytail that stays completely in place while you train, and then, and they all quickly whip it out before the post-class photo. I'm like, oh my God. I battle with the whole, like, should I just shave my head, like, every day? But I'm just too scared that if I do it, I'm going to just regret it, and then it's too late. And it'll just take too much maintenance to, like, constantly be trying to keep it short. So I'm like, for now, I've learned to live with it as it is.
Yeah, the hair is a big issue that you have to figure out, and you can almost, like, see a girl's commitment to jiu-jitsu by the length of her hair.
So true. Yeah, I was always really impressed with Bridget, who just decided to go short, but she looked great in it. And I was like, but then you ask her about it, she had to maintain it. She was constantly getting it like, cut and styled and coloured and stuff. And I mean, that's fine. I suppose it just becomes part of your
routine, I think what
but
I've learned, because I cut my hair relatively short thinking that it would make it easier, and then what you learn is it's actually harder, because it's hard to, like, keep back short hair. Whereas if you had longer hair, you can put it into a braid, and that braid, or a ponytail, and that will keep it out of your hair. So it's actually counterproductive to have shorter hair. Yeah,
there's some happy mediums going on for sure. I actually, when I did my undercut, I've never looked back. I've never regretted that, and I love it. And, like, it's, I mean, when I can get it done, you did it for me last time, so I don't want to be rude. It was fine. It was absolutely fine. Thank you very much. It's still there. But when I can get it properly faded, and it looks professional, then obviously that's great. But yeah, when that's not possible, thank you, COVID. Anyone who can just, like, pick up my clippers and just give me a grade 1, all there. But yeah, it is really useful, because obviously people are putting their hands behind your neck all the time. But now I have what hair I do have up in a bun, which is just always what I've done since the beginning. Ish. I do remember one time, like, maybe it was my second or third class, and I was still like, what the shit do I do with my hair? I looked online, and then it was like Ronda Rousey talking about doing it like Chun-Li, like two braids. Right. And I remember going into class like that thinking, yeah, maybe this is the answer. Maybe this is what you've got to do, And then I just never did that again. It's like so ridiculous. But yeah, what the problem is it gets caught. I want to get my head out of something, and my bun is, like, literally holding my head in place. So that's annoying.
Yeah, there's all sorts of little hair accidents that happen. The worst one, the one I hate the most, is, like, when you just hear a rip.
Yeah.
And then you turn around, there's just, like, a whole chunk of your hair out, and I'm just like,
Yeah. But it's so funny, because you see people at really high levels who have all kinds of hair. I've seen some black guys with huge dreads, and they're like brown black belts, and you're like, you just work around it, I guess.
Yeah.
You do. You just, like, you find a way. I mean, we all know that physically every shape and size can do jiu-jitsu to some degree. And so you find out what the pros and cons are to your particular size and shape and strength and age and everything. And I suppose your hairstyle is just part of that. There's going to be some pros and there's going to be some cons, no matter what you have.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point also about like the different size and shapes and how even if you're really small, you can still get into it. There aren't a lot of small girls. I guess there's a lot more happening now. But when I started, like there were no girls my size. Even now, there's still no girls my size. But thankfully, we live in Asia. There's like smaller.
Yeah,
men here.
exactly. You're more likely to have people nearer your size here in Asia than you would be in the US or the UK.
Yeah. I remember when I went there to train, I went to the States. I was training in a gym in California. And yeah, the men are different in terms of size. And here, they're kind of this, you have some large men, but then you also have some Asian men mixed in. And you also have people from different nationalities. I think in Thailand, you get a lot more different nationalities. So you train with a lot more like variety. Yeah. Whereas in the States, there's not as much variety. And so the options are much more. I
actually feel more sorry for really big guys when they come into a gym here because they will have, less training partners than the people at the lower end of the size chart. There's just so few, like, really big guys. We had a guy come over once who was just desperate for a Muay Thai fight. And he was like, he's a Muay Thai trainer. Muay Thai fighter. And I think he was Canadian. And he was just huge. He was like 6'4", 5 even, and built pretty big. And of course, a few months went by and he went back home because how are they going to find him a fighter? I mean, an opponent. They're not going to find him another Westerner because that doesn't work with matchups, like to get views, to be able to kind of make a good card. They want to match the foreigners with Thais. And there are no Thais that size. It's just virtually impossible. The only time you can get someone who will be in that weight category is if you get a big fat Thai. But there's no kind of like tall, chunky athletic. I mean, obviously there are here and there, but like they're just incredibly hard to find. And then you've got to find them at that particular level of Muay Thai as well. It's just not happening.
Yeah, I guess at both ends of the spectrum, people have problems. Like the really small people and the really big people have problems finding their matches.
Yeah, it's true. I'm pretty glad to be what I think is average.
Yeah, I think so. How much do you weigh in kilos?
57.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I was, when I was competing in gi, I actually was a little bit heavier. I was like 58, but I wanted to compete at 58, so I would try to lose weight because obviously you have to take into account the weight of your gi. And I was sort of walking around at like 58, maybe even 59, and then your gi weighs like 1.5 to 2 kg. So I was having to kind of like lose quite a bit. But then when I went vegan, I just like dropped right down very quickly, and then have just kind of maintained like during I've definitely had the old COVID kilos in the various lockdowns, but they go away very quickly as soon as I'm back on training as much as usual. And so 57 seems to be around where I sit. And I'm 5'7", so I think that's like an average. I feel tall here for a girl. When I'm just around other girls here, generally I'm the tallest or one of the tallest. But obviously in the UK, I'm very, very average. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you excited to go back to the UK and train with like different people?
Yeah, I am actually. I am now. Yeah, obviously it's, this period between me closing the restaurant and deciding to go back and actually having a flight booked has been quite long. So I've had a long time to kind of adjust to it. So I feel fully adjusted and adapted, and I'm like, yeah, ready to go. And like, I mean, the guys that I'll be training with in the UK are people I've trained with before, because I used to go back to the UK every summer for the first few years. But I'm looking forward to getting this women's only class started and hoping that I can, get a few women started, and then integrated. If I can start a small group of women and get them all to the point, based on their history, because maybe some of them may not want to ever train with men, they might be doing jiu-jitsu for a different reason, and that's fine. But if they love it, and I can get them all to the point where they feel comfortable going into the mixed classes, then I'll be like, job done. And then I'll feel like I can kind of move on with my other plans and projects, which are more travel based.
Yeah. I think also if I were ever to teach a girls only class, I would only do it for white belts. I think, once you're a blue belt, you have to start training with other people. You don't really know what you don't know until you start training with different people. So I think it only works as a beginner step to get people into it, to give them the experience and the beginning training. And then, like you said, you send them off into the wild.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think another thing that kind of should happen from blue belt onwards, to some extent. I mean, I don't know exactly how I feel about this, but my general thoughts right now are that from blue belt onwards, you have to also take control of your own training a lot more, You can't so much be just reliant on kind of turning up to a class, being taught by a coach, and just, if you want to really get better. Do you have any more specific points to make?
I feel like we've talked quite a bit about jiu-jitsu. I don't have any other specific points to make. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining too much. I've talked about like injuries and training with men and all that, which I always enjoy. Like I'm really grateful that I have good training partners, and all of my coaches have been men, and they've all been really, really nice. I'm very grateful for all the men that I've trained with who have really helped me. I would not be nearly as good without them. So I definitely think that there has to be mixed classes at some point.
Do you watch a lot of jiu-jitsu online?
I used to in the beginning when I started. I would, watch a lot of videos and stuff. But nowadays, I watch a lot less, because what I felt was that I was seeing a lot of different techniques, but I wasn't like mastering or practicing a lot of the stuff that I learned. And then I thought, maybe I just need to stop looking at all of that and just get good at a couple things first, like get good at the stuff that I already know how to do before I
Sure.
keep taking on
But then,
more.
so when you think of watching jiu-jitsu online, you are thinking tutorials, right?
Yeah.
You're thinking demonstrations of techniques, talking through a tutorial, essentially. Because, of course, the other thing you can watch is high-level matches.
Yeah, I do love watching high-level matches. I do a lot of that.
Yeah.
I learn a lot from seeing how professionals roll.
Yeah, so I'm trying to do that more than I am watching tutorials, because it's very easy to get caught up in tutorials, and like, you're working on a particular thing, you type that in and like fucking 100 videos come up about it, and you can really do some kind of crazy deep diving into the different, details that different coaches have on something. And it's a little overwhelming, no matter what level you're at. But yeah, I think watching high level competitions it's almost weirdly helpful. Like, you wouldn't think it would be as helpful as it is. But I don't know if it's actually true or not, but it feels like you can pretty much translate, the sort of the way that they move and certain just sort of like certain level of creativity and freedom as well, that you can kind of then take onto the mats, rather than a kind of step-by-step A to Z technique.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is that, so then I started trying to kind of like remind myself to watch more matches and less tutorials. But I found that I was still being very drawn to the men's matches. And I didn't really realize it at first. And then I think I was at Amanda's place, and she was like, oh, did you see that match between two girls? And I was like, no. And then we watched it, and I was like, wow, why do I not watch more of the women? Like, this is crazy. Like, because it was so awesome. And then I realized that I think like several years ago, when I would have maybe watched some men, some women, I found the women just like, they just didn't look like they were matching up. You know, the men looked better. They looked better at the same level. You're talking about black belt matches, you know, whatever comp it is. And I just now think that the women, even though they've had to compete less to get to that point because there's less of them, and there's less of them at the top, you know, all vying for those top 10 places. They just look amazing now. You know, that Medusa event that we just watched, and then there was the Who's Number One recently, and, you know, just the women look amazing.
Yeah.
And now I really feel like I could quite happily watch like majority women, you know. I mean, I do like watching the smaller guys, you know, the kind of more the Mendes brothers style kind of, you know, passing and stuff, not, you know, big heavyweights. It's like, just looks, I don't know how much I would gain from watching like heavyweight matches, you know. But yeah, obviously there are guys that are kind of, you know, near our weight divisions. But the women are just looking so good, and I'm learning so much just from watching them. Yeah,
I agree. A few years ago, there wasn't really a lot of women jiu-jitsu matches to watch, but now it's totally changed. Now we're getting lots of good, high-quality jiu-jitsu matchups with women only, and I learned so much watching them roll, like definitely. And it's funny that you gravitated more towards the men. I never really enjoyed watching a lot of the men's matches because I just felt like I couldn't really apply a lot of that to my jiu-jitsu because I knew that they were a lot stronger, they were a lot bigger, and they're not doing the moves and the techniques that someone small has to learn. You know, so I've always wanted to look for women because then I knew that I could apply those moves to like my own game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's great. I'm playing around with that old underhook for the seatbelt.
Who's your favorite, like, female jiu-jitsu practitioner?
Well, I don't know if I have a favorite. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm trying to remember the name of this girl who's actually been commentating for Flow a bit. And she did really well in the Who's Number One recently as well. I just keep forgetting what her actual name is, which is really bad. I'm going to go... I did this the other day. I was like, I can't believe I forgot it again. And I went and looked it up and I was like, get it in your head. And now, here we are again, forgotten.
This is why we needed Jamie. Jamie, pull that up.
Come on. That would be cool. Oh, that's what my laptops are going to be for. You could just have it there ready.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's American, and just she's a great commentator as well. Like anyone who's listening to this who might be wondering who I'm talking about, you've only got to watch the Flow grappling footage of Who's Number One, which is obviously one of their events, and she's the only female commentator. I mean, one thing that did annoy me about that Medusa event, much as I love the fact that it was a thing, that it was even, you know, put up, and thank you Eddie Bravo and his team for that, because I love those rule sets, and you know, it was an awesome event, and it's great to have a women's only event like that. But every single referee, well, there's only two of them, I know, but still, both referees and all commentators were all men. And it would be okay to have some men, but, like, you know, they could have at least had some women commentating. There were plenty of high-level women who were not in the competition who could have been, like, commentating or refereeing. Yeah, and I think my only other negative about that event was just, like, I don't think, you know, the referees being in, like, trainers and singlets is, like, just doesn't look very professional, you know. That would be my only other thing. It's like, couldn't you just wear a shirt and black socks? Shoes on the mats. Yeah, but anyway, great event.
Yeah, and progress takes time, you know, it's like a slow thing. I think eventually we'll move more towards women commentators, women referees, women in the business. I'm just happy that we're starting to get to that place, you know, because when I started jiu-jitsu, I was looking for female role models to learn from, and everybody knows, like, the Gracies and Danaher and, like, all of those, but they're all men, and I was like, where are the really good women.
Yeah.
But now, you know, they're starting to come up. I follow Giseri Matuda. She's great. Obviously, I love Fiona Davies. She's also great. I'm starting to see like the women role models coming up, and so it makes me hopeful for the future.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Fionn is awesome. Love watching her stuff, and we've got a few other good black belts in the UK as well. I think Sam Cook and Vanessa English are just a couple of the names I know. There's probably I've been out of the UK scene for a few years, so I'm not quite sure. But yeah, I was starting to kind of look at. They were in Polaris and stuff, so it was kind of fun to watch them. Gisari, I don't know so well. I was a fan of Michelle Nicolini for a while she was still competing, and there's many now. Thank God, there's so many that we kind of don't even know, how to pick a bunch of names. But those youngsters. Levy, was it Levy? Is that her name? The girl who beat Gabby Garcia in the first round. That was pretty amazing. At who's number one? She was really good. In fact, honestly, all the women in that Medusa event as well were incredible. And then on the smaller women's front, Grace Gundrum and damn it, I can never remember the name of Amanda's going to kill me. She's a fan of the girl who actually did win, who beat Grace Gundrum, but I for some reason can't remember her name. My God, so bad with names. I would be struggling for names if you asked me to name the guys as well. I'm just so bad with names. But yeah, that was a great match. It's awesome when you get a great matchup, so you get to really see good skill from both players. And I think that Medusa event was full of that. Who's number one was to some degree too.
There's going to be, I think it's this weekend, a new Who's Number One with Fionn Davies. She's competing for the belt, so maybe we can watch that after this.
Cool.
All right, so do you have any advice or anything for women who are thinking of getting into jiu-jitsu? Because I'm always trying to get my friends into it, and sometimes I feel like I'm not the right person to do it, they don't listen to me just because they know me. Yeah,
it has to come from someone else. That's true. It's always difficult trying to get your own friends and family into something. I think it's a good idea to try to get people to watch some stuff. I remember there was always this kind of why hasn't anyone made a definitive intro to jiu-jitsu type video that really highlights it, and for that purpose, so that people who don't know what it is, have never done it before, but you want to try to convince them to come to a class, you can literally say, watch this. And some started to appear. They were kind of cool, but they were still a bit cliquey and are still not kind of, and I don't know, I'm yet to see that video. Maybe I'll try to make one myself, specifically for women. But yeah, there's plenty out there, man. YouTube is just absolutely riddled, should I say. It's not a great word, but full of jiu-jitsu stuff. Whether it's matches, which is maybe not the thing to show beginners, because you're automatically putting that kind of competitive element in there, which doesn't need to be there to start with. So maybe not high-level matches, but some good footage of some nice gyms, where you're seeing people train and have a good time, and kind of that's what you need. That's what I'm hoping to do with the Travelog channel. Go into lots of gyms and really show, not just not focus 100% on just the jiu-jitsu. Show everything, the facilities, students having a good time, laughing, some social stuff,
Talk more about this Travelog channel. What are you calling it?
Yeah, I'm waiting to hear back from this girl who calls herself Jiu-Jitsu Gypsy.
Okay.
Gypsy spelled G-Y, the normal way, Gypsy. But I wanted to call my channel Gypsy Jiu-Jitsu, but Gypsy spelled J-I, But she's American, so she can probably get away with the whole gypsy thing. But in the UK, it's sort of not really, it's a bit non-PC. No, it's a bit, it's a bit non-PC to say gypsy. they like to be called travelers or something. There's a different word for it. But I wouldn't be like saying it in that way, right? My use of the name is the same as this other girl, Heather Rafferty, by the way, black belt Heather Rafferty, amazing. She's often teaching at the Globetrotter camps. And she also lives in a van. I think she, because she works kind of remotely and does other things. But mainly so she can compete in jiu-jitsu. She just like drives around a van. So anyway, I contacted her the other day to ask, how did she feel about me maybe using the name Gypsy Jiu-Jitsu for my channel, but spelt differently and the words the other way around. And well, I'll wait to hear from her. I don't want to just do it, without her sort of approving it. So if she doesn't approve it, then I might have to think of a different name. But anyway, it's basically the idea is a kind of jiu-jitsu travelogue. So, traveling around to different gyms around Europe initially, but maybe in the future I'll do the US and Canada. And just trying to show small gyms in the best possible light, so that they can use it as their own kind of like little promo. Mm-hmm. But so that we can kind of build up a following of people who appreciate visitor-friendly gyms. Because usually if you're a gym that is friendly to outsiders, to guests dropping by, then you're probably just generally a friendly gym. There are gyms around the world that don't really allow guests, certainly not like white belts, blue belts or whatever, unannounced, just turning up or whatever. And I think that, they're probably highly competitive gyms maybe, or for whatever reason. I don't think if a gym isn't set up for and kind of welcoming to guests, then why, if you're a guest, would you want to train there anyway? So I definitely want to highlight the gyms that appreciate when people stop by and come through, and also the ones that encourage their own students to go out and train at other gyms, and when they go on holiday, when they choose where they're going on holiday, feels like a bit of an alien thing to think about these days, but at some point we'll be deciding where to go on holiday again. And, are they choosing somewhere that has a gym nearby because they want to go train, or does there just happen to be a gym nearby where they're going and they might want to drop in? It's an obsessive sport for sure. A lot of people want to train while they're on holiday. They don't want to give up a week of training. And also, I've done a lot of training in lots of different gyms, and I can tell you pick up a lot because there's things going on in other gyms that you won't see in your gym, just because jiu-jitsu's a huge topic. It's ever growing, ever evolving. And you can't possibly know everything in one gym. Your coach, no matter how good he is, no matter how many stripes he's got on his black belt, cannot know everything. And, you don't know what you're going to pick up from anyone in a totally different gym. It's also just really nice to be in a different environment with different people who you've never met before, but you automatically have this one thing in common.
Yeah. That sounds great. I love the idea. It is nice to know where to go if you're going to travel, like you said, travel-friendly gyms, or like people can walk in and know that they'll be welcome there. That's really important. I think it would also encourage, it helps the gym, it helps everybody who wants to learn.
Yeah.
It's a nice idea.
Cool. Yeah. Just gotta make sure I can execute it well, and then I think it would. It's the kind of channel that I would want to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm not gonna lie. I've been massively inspired by the Daisy Fresh series, on Flow Grappling, and I think, that little series that's going on. I think they're in their second season now. That's drawn in people. People are watching that who don't do jiu-jitsu, because it's so well made, and the characters that they're following and the way they're filming and editing it is so engaging. It's probably drawing a lot of people in who don't do jiu-jitsu, who may well now start because of it. And also, I think there's a lot of people just watching it for pure entertainment value, and don't really have any desire to necessarily start. But it's an interesting little thing they've done there, They've just showed what can be done. I think Flow Grappling in general are doing an amazing job now of just filming, and they were not always amazing, let's face it. So anyway, Flow Grappling are doing a really good job of making jiu-jitsu into a legit looking spectator sport.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are coming together. The more it becomes like a recognized sport, then
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so onwards and upwards as far as that's concerned. I think it's only going to grow. I really hope it's not that kind of thing like the karate in the 70s. Like there was a karate school on every single corner. And then, what happened to that? You hardly see them anymore. I'm sure there's lots of people doing karate worldwide. In fact, I know there is, obviously, but doesn't seem to be quite as popular or prevalent as it was back then. So I hope jiu-jitsu doesn't go the same direction, but who knows?
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. I mean, I guess times change, fads change. I think the karate thing kind of came out of like the movies that were centered around it, and it exposed people to what it's like. I don't think we have like a big jiu-jitsu movie yet. Like
no, there's a few like starting to involve, the fight choreography is definitely starting to take on some moves. It's funny to watch.
It's funny to watch. It's so awkward.
Sometimes you're like, yeah, come on. Sometimes you're like, oh no,
what's
you need
that?
to get an expert on to like show you how to do that properly. It's funny.
Yeah.
There was a good movie, I can't remember the name of it, but Gina Carano, when she first kind of came away from the ring and went into movies, she did this one movie which was...
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it. It was quite good, actually. I mean, she was good in it, and the fights were good in it. The movie as a whole was kind of weird. There were parts of it where I was like, is that... Like, are they joking? Like, I couldn't quite work out whether it was, like, satire or whether... But I think on the whole, it was actually quite a kind of cool little B-movie. Wasn't even B-movie, it was at the cinema, but I just can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, maybe I'll go back and watch it. But I think we do need, like, either a TV series or a movie that brings jiu-jitsu to the public in a way like that they can really understand and then get inspired by and actually go in and start training. And then hopefully it sticks around and it doesn't just fade away. I think with karate, it's not really effective as a real life technique. Maybe.
Well, I just don't know whether whether jiu-jitsu ever will get to that stage, because the thing is, like, everyone understands punching and kicking, right? It's very visual and you can see it, and you don't need to feel it to know what's going on. But the problem with grappling is that so much of it is felt and not seen. And there's a lot, it's very close combat. You can't see, you literally can't see what's going on a lot of the time. I just don't know. Like, obviously very clear moves, rear naked. This is why you keep the one move you do keep seeing, or the two moves that you do keep seeing in movies more and more now is the arm bar or rear naked choke. But that's because they are very clear visually, you know. But all the other stuff that goes on, and like leg locks and stuff, people will be like, what are they doing? I don't understand. Like, unless you're actually literally seeing things break, it's hard to know where the tension is, They've got their hands up by your feet, but it's actually the knee that's going, Unless you know the mechanics of the body and how like leg locks work, it would be difficult to really appreciate.
Yeah, I guess it takes a lot of time to educate people, or they really need to like try it themselves to understand it. But I feel like I have a lot of hope that once people try jiu-jitsu, and if they like it, if they have a good experience, they'll be hooked for life. I do think it's like one of those things that isn't just a fad, because there's so much, like you said, personal growth that happens with jiu-jitsu. It's almost more important than the actual physical stuff. But the physical stuff is super important, especially as a woman. Like before I got into jiu-jitsu, I wasn't very healthy. I wasn't very active, even though I kind of kept myself in shape. I always wondered, like, as I got older, would I get more out of shape? Would I start to gain weight and it would be harder to keep it off? But then once I got into jiu-jitsu, I realized, like, okay, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, and it's going to keep me healthy for the rest of my life. And so there's just so many benefits to doing it that I feel like once you get into it and you really experience it, it's hard to stop.
Yeah, it's very addictive. I think another thing that makes it addictive is how steep your learning curve is. You learn a lot very quickly, even if it doesn't really feel like it to begin with. The first time that you train with someone new, you're the new person, right, to start with. But then at some point, whether it's weeks or months later, someone else joins and you're no longer the new person. And then when you train with them, you realize how much you've learned and what you know. And I think from that point on, you know, you only realize that you're learning a lot very quickly. And that's addictive.
Yeah, we just got to get people over the learning curve in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's where we lose a lot of women and a lot of men too, but definitely like a lot of people, it's that early stretch. And I think sometimes these instructors or these black belts or gym owners, it's been so long since they were a beginner that they've kind of forgotten what it feels like. And so they don't have the culture that's friendly to beginners. And maybe that's something that we can change. Yeah,
totally. I don't know why more gym owners don't like just allow their blue belts to teach beginner classes, you know, like they're perfectly competent at doing it. And, you know, the quicker that your students can start to learn how to teach also, the better they'll be when they're black belts, you know, the better teachers they'll be. You know, it can come with lots of verbal caveats, you know, you know, this blue belt will be taking the beginner class. You know, you will probably learn other ways to do many of the same things that might work better or worse for you, or different information. But right now, you know nothing. You know nothing. And this guy has been training or girl has been training for 2 years. You know, they know a lot more than you. So just listen to them and do what they say. You know, but I think too many black belts look at the blue belts and they think, oh, I mean, yeah, sure, they're blue belts, but they're still doing this wrong, that wrong, that wrong. Yeah. You know, and oh, if I got them to teach, I can hear them teaching that white belt and they're saying this wrong, that wrong. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, as long as it's not something major, you know, that's really going to kind of instill some terrible habit in that white belt. I think on the whole, especially when it comes to just warm-ups and like general movement and drills and things, as a blue belt, you should be competent enough to do that to beginners, to pure beginners.
Yeah. Hopefully we find out. I'm thinking of doing a class one of these days, but I'm still a blue belt. I kind of want to get a purple belt or something. I feel like I'm not qualified to teach yet.
That's the thing, though. I'm not sure that anyone ever really feels qualified to teach at any stage, you know. If you're a black belt, and you've been teaching since you were a blue or purple or brown, then yeah, maybe when you get your black belt, you think, okay, I've also been teaching for a few years too, so now I'm, you know, really feel like but that's why I think you should be teaching, you know, lower down in the coloured belts, just teach beginners here and there, because then you will also be good at teaching. Imagine if you've never taught a class until you get your black belt. And then you're a black belt, everyone's expecting you to be, oh, you're a fucking black belt and you're awesome at jiu-jitsu, but you've never taught before. So now you're having to teach and you might be shit at teaching. And you probably will be, because everyone's shit when they first do things. So, you know, you need to get all of that out of the way when you're earlier on.
It's a good point. It's a very good argument. I'll definitely think about that, and maybe it'll give me the push that I need to start teaching earlier, because Erin's asked me to start teaching women's class. Right. I was like, no, I'm not ready.
You should. You'd be surprised at how much you know. But I think, you know, a lot of it is actually your knowledge is fine and, you know, demonstrating everything, but it's structuring a class and it's like paying attention to the time and making sure that, you know, you don't, even if you plan a class, that you're flexible enough to change it if something happens, you know, if the people that you expected to come don't come, or there's suddenly some new person arrives that, you know, you weren't expecting, and like, then what do you do? So those things are the more difficult things about teaching a class than actually teaching the jiu-jitsu. You'll find when you actually are teaching the bones of jiu-jitsu, you're like, oh, this is coming naturally to me, because you've done it so many times before yourself and you're speaking from experience, and you'll definitely know more than you think you do. But yeah, it's those other aspects of running a class which can be tricky.
Interesting.
That's why you should start with my infinity drills, because that's you know, it's a very flexible and easy way to kind of get people into the basic movements of jiu-jitsu, but with you know, you can work in all those things. Doesn't matter if it's their first class or whether you've got a purple belt in the class. I was always very respectful of this guy V who runs the gym in Cambodia in Phnom Penh, because he's been teaching in his gym since he was a blue belt. And I think he's now a brown belt, at least. Maybe he's even a black belt by now, I don't know. But it didn't matter who came to his class, because he would have higher belts come through. Sometimes they would be there for a few months. Sometimes they would just be, you know, stopping by. He would still teach, but he would obviously ask for their input. So if one of them had something specific to say, But he was an amazing teacher and respected by his class and trusted and gave those students consistency, one coach. And then I think it's worked really well. Their gym has done really well. And it's a small-ish gym, but when they come over to do Copa de Bangkok, when they did come over a few years ago, relative to the numbers, from the other gyms, they did super well. They came third overall, even though the next two big teams two teams were much bigger. And him and his brother do a really good job of running that school there.
Good, because it's a good example that you can do great things even as a blue belt. Starting young.
Yeah, he just had that confidence that he, knew what he knew and that he was good at structuring a class and leading a class.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Bring this to a close before you get the timer going on us yet again.
Yes. Oh, this has been great, though. You've given me a lot to think about.
Cool.
It's been fun.
Well, it's awesome. Every time you and I get together and chat, we seem to fire off each other well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll miss it. We'll have to schedule in some Zoom calls every now and then so that we can
virtual podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're gonna start some group of people who are doing the similar things who can all kind of help each other with info, right?
Yeah. Hopefully, I'm hoping to turn this into a community style thing and bring lots of different types of guests on and have lots of different conversations. That's
an awesome idea. I love it. I will support from afar, and who knows, may even come back at some point.
Yeah.
It's hard to know where my life will lead me in the next few years, but I've really loved this time that I've spent down here in Rayong and with you, and what a lovely little part of the world you have here.
Good. I hope you come back soon. I've been trying to get you to stay. I know you have lots of plans, but I hope that you come back.
Yeah. I'm sure I will at some point, even if it's just a temporary thing, for a month or something.
Or it's a permanent thing and you get your plot of land and you start your gym and your vegan cafe.
Yeah. Who knows? Anyway, thank you, Claire.
Yeah,
that's great.
Thank you too. Okay, we did it.
Nice.